Welcome, everyone. We'll get started with Free the Anxious Generation movement in just a moment. Just a brief introduction. Hi, my name is Jenn David Lang. I've been an educator for over 30 years, and now I support school and district leaders through workshops and speaking, and through my online professional learning mastermind, and by summarizing books for the main idea. I know school leaders are very busy people, so I started the main idea where each month I summarize either an education or a leadership book, and I create PD ideas you can use. And I'm so excited that this month I summarized The Anxious Generation, and I created a discussion guide you can use with families, because so many educators want to learn more about this important issue, and they want to know how to talk to their families about it. So you'll get the summary and discussion guide after the webinar. So we are going to get started. And before we do, I just want to acknowledge that what we're talking about today is not academic for so many of us, particularly in education. It's very real, and it's impacting our students, our teachers, our school communities, and in many cases it's personal. It's actually impacting our own children. So I understand this may be personal and emotional for you. But I did want to just start with a brief Zoom poll about cell phone use in the schools where you work. So if you could just give us an idea, so John and we will all know what's happening across the US, in fact, the world, and in Portugal. So what is your school or district approach to cell phone use? Is it a complete phone ban from the time kids come to school till they get their phones at the end of the day or open up their pouches then? Is it a ban only in the class, or is there no school-wide policy, or teachers get to decide from class to class? So we'll take a moment for that.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Oh, good. John's happy before he even starts. So look how evenly that's split. Could you have guessed that? 678, 600, that's very evenly split.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, if this had been done 6 months ago, then I would have expected very few to be phone free. But actually, so many states, so many are going phone free right now. So actually, this is thrilling.
Yeah, talking about it here at the state level in New York. All right. So let me introduce Jonathan Haidt, who is a man who needs no introduction, at least here among us educators. We're all reading his book, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for 24 weeks. I saw that when I opened up my Times this Sunday. That's almost 6 months. Amazing. He's a social psychologist and a professor at the NYU Stern School of Business, who has been thinking about and researching the increase in youth mental health issues for a while now, and he sees those as connected to two things. One, an increase in youth cell phone use, and at the same time, a decrease in play and face-to-face interaction in real life. So many of us today here are educators, particularly educational leaders. We are seeing the impact of both of those phenomena in our schools. So we're eager to hear directly from you, John, not just about the problem, but also about the opportunity we have, because I definitely believe schools are uniquely positioned to address these problems as well. So with that, I bring you John Haidt.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jen. And what a pleasure to be able to address this audience. First, just personally, I thought it was really cool when I once had a Zoom call, a Zoom webinar with more than 1,000 people. I thought, wow, I really hit the big time. But I'm looking at the number here, 2.3 thousand. So thank you to EdWeb. Thank you, Jen, because what my book is all about and what we're here to talk about is really collective action. The fact that we can't solve this. When each of us tries to solve it as a single parent or a single teacher in a classroom, the forces against you are overwhelming. But if we work together, we actually can solve this. And so I'm thrilled that we have such a big audience of classroom teachers, of school administrators, even of district level administrators. So let's go. Let's talk about what's happening, and then let's fix it. All right, so let's talk. I want to get you sort of prime your mind. I want you to think about tree roots growing. Trees are these amazing things. They're really elaborate organisms, and they grow very slowly. So look at the way these tree roots grow, and sort of they attach where they can get some water. Look at this tree growing around an old Civil War grave. the grave headstone was in its way, so it sort of grows around it. Look at this one, where there was an iron bar and the tree kind of grew around it, and then somebody put googly eyes on it because it was cute. But the point is, think about this slow growth of trees. Okay, now think about the slow growth of human bones. So suppose you were to rest, rest a 12-ounce object or however much a phone weighs. Suppose you were to rest it on your pinky for 8 or 10 hours a day every day while you were growing up. What would happen? And the answer is what's called phone pinky. So some young people now, those that are heavy users of phones, because you rest the phone on your left pinky if you're right-handed, so they're discovering that their bones have grown in a curved way. Only their left pinky, not their right pinky. And so that's why, don't bother looking yourself, because if you've already gone through puberty before you got a smartphone, this isn't happening to you. It's happening to our necks as well. So our phone-based life, which came in between 2010 and 2015, our phone-based life is changing our skeletons, and it's changing our eyeballs, especially for children. There's a global rise in myopia, and it appears to be caused primarily by the fact that kids are spending so much time on screens, which is very close exposure indoors, and getting too little sunlight in particular, too little long views, outdoor play, leads to a change in the shape of the eyeball. So human eyeballs are becoming elongated from the phone-based childhood, and therefore human vision is deteriorating around the world. It's almost as if our brains have been growing around these phones. We gave our kids phones. We began to give them smartphones around 2010, and their brains have grown around them, just as this tree has grown around this tombstone. What we're here to talk about is the consequences of that. How did this happen, and what has it done to us? And the story in my book, it's a tragedy in 2 acts. In Act 1, the play-based childhood faded out. It was gradual from the late 80s, really, to by 2010, it was pretty much gone. And that's when we get Act 2, which is the phone-based childhood comes storming in, almost fully formed by 2015, when we get the iPhone, front-facing camera, high-speed internet. And another way to say this is that we have overprotected our children in the real world. We have underprotected them online. Both are mistakes. Both are bad for human development. We've got to stop doing both of these. So in the rest of my time with you, I'll make these 5 points, and then we'll have some time for discussion, for questions and answers, which I'm very much looking forward to. So let's start. Most of the discussion around this and the debates that I have with other researchers, they're all around mental illness. Is it the case that phones have caused an increase in mental illness? And there are, I think the evidence is very strong that it has, and some debate with me. But it's not just about mental illness. What's happening to Gen Z, those born after 1995, is across the board developmental obstacles. Learning, education is, I think, the clearest and the best documented. Derek Thompson last year had an article that sure looks like the phones are making students dumber. And you can see that this is the NAEP, the nation's report card. And as you can see, we made progress in reading and math scores from 1971 all the way up to 2012. That it was very slow. It's hard to raise the national ability to read and do math, but we did slowly until 2012. And then look what happens. So we only noticed this because of the COVID drop, and everybody talks about, oh my God, look how terrible COVID was, COVID restrictions. And that's true, they were. Our kids lost a lot in COVID. But as you see, it didn't begin in 2020. It began in 2012. 50 years of progress began to turn around in 2012. And it's not just us, it's the entire planet. This is the PISA data set. You all know what that is. It's the only international measure of academic achievement. And the scores were pretty stable until 2012. And after 2012, they begin to drop around the world. And it's not just that kids are not learning in school. They're not learning as much in school. Think about being a kid in school. You're anxious about making friends. You're worried about being excluded. If you have a group, you're happy. Things are good. But if you don't, you're not. Now, imagine what happens in 2012, 2013, when all the kids are now bringing in smartphones and they're on them all the time. PISA has embedded in it, we found these 6 items, one of which, for example, is I feel lonely at school. 6 items like that. How much do you agree or disagree with them? You plot out, Jean Twenge and I took the average of these 6 items, plotted it out. What you see is that there was no change between 2000 and 2012. And then what happens? After 2012, all around the world, kids are lonelier and more unhappy at school because everyone's on their phone. You can't talk to people as well. You're not talking, I mean, you might as well just stay home and sit on your phone. Many of you will resonate with this Wall Street Journal article you may have seen last spring. A teacher in Pennsylvania just couldn't stand it. He went to war against this. He tried to get the phones to have less influence on his kids. He had them try to do a detox. Can they go without their phone for a month, or it was reduced usage for a month? And so he said, so the article says, before the detox, Isabel Ritchie, who was a student in his class, she was spending 6 hours a day on her phone, most of it watching TikTok. And some of that was in class, that 6 hours a day. Some of it was at school and in class. She said, I would go on my phone at the beginning of every class and never get off. She just was not available to the teacher to learn. She's now down to about an hour a day and has read 9 novels since starting the detox. She's been doing homework in long chunks without breaking to watch TikTok every 10 minutes. She's in a better mood. So our kids are being robbed of education, happiness, and social life. They're very unhappy. And they're even doing this in school. We're letting it happen in school. At least we were until very recently. Now, if I had a longer time with you, I would go through so many things that are happening to Gen Z. What we're going through now, I believe, is the greatest destruction of human capital and human potential in human history. Hard to compare to World War I and World War II, but if we set those two aside, what's happened since 2010 to young people in America and across the Western world for sure is the greatest destruction of human capital and human potential. It's going very fast. It's spreading. We've got to stop it. I've told you about the first two, number 1 and 2. I will tell you about 4 and 5, but there's a lot more to the story. This is an across-the-board blocking of human development. So let's talk about the mental health crisis, because that's where I have the best data. So I noticed this. I first got into this because the students, I teach at NYU, and the students who were arriving in 2014, 2015, they were just different from everything we'd ever seen before. And all across the country, mental health centers on college campuses filled up. By 2015, they were all full. Wasn't like that in 2012. And what we see here, this is nationally representative data, or adjusted to be. In 2012, all the students were millennials. These were the rates of various disorders. So ADHD was rising a little bit, but it's really the yellow line, psychological disorders. When Gen Z begins arriving in 2014, it's the psychological disorders that go way, way up, basically tripling. So this is more data from college students. What we see, and you'll see in all the lines I show you, there's no change before 2010. And then after 2010, this happens. So these are the rates for American college students. Anxiety is up 134% since 2010. And this was all before COVID. I often stop before COVID so you can see all of this was baked in before COVID. This was not caused by COVID. So anxiety and depression are now normal parts of being a teen, especially if you're a girl. I'll come back to that. It's only Gen Z. It's not as though this was happening to everybody. Older people aren't more anxious than they used to be. It's only young people who are way more anxious than they were 15 years ago. Everything about this is gendered because we're talking about internalizing disorders, which are more characteristic of girls. That gap especially opens up in early puberty. So the rates of depression for girls on top and boys on the bottom there, they go up. It's actually, percentage-wise, it's actually not that different, but because girls start from such a much higher level, it is now just a normal part of American girlhood that you're depressed, anxious, and thinking about suicide. It's not a majority, but it's a large minority. In fact, CDC study, 25% of American teenage girls say they have made a suicide plan in the last year. At least they've thought about it enough to make a plan of how they would do it. This is just normal now. This is what it is to be a teen girl in America, or Britain, or Canada, or much of the rest of the world. And COVID was a small part of this story. Now, some critics have said, oh, it's just that Gen Z is so comfortable talking about it. Oh, Haidt has Haidt's causing a moral panic. It's just that changes in diagnostic criteria from Obamacare or something like that. Well, if that was the case, then we would not see increases in behavioral measures, but we do. This is the number per 100,000 that are brought to emergency rooms, mostly for self-harm. What we see is a gigantic increase for younger teen girls, especially, also for older teen girls. But you always see the biggest percentage increases, doubling or sometimes tripling, are girls 10 to 14. Whatever it is that happened, girls 10 to 14 have been decimated. We see that with suicide as well. Now, more boys commit suicide. They tend to use irreversible means. So these are the rates for, younger teens. And what we see is that, of course, boys' rates are higher and their increase is quite large. But look at the girls' increase. It's not just that it's larger overall. It's that, and this is true for a lot of the lines for boys slope upwards. The lines for girls are like hockey sticks at 2012, 2013. Between 2012 and 2013, there was a 67% increase in suicides of these younger teens. That's a gigantic increase, and it wasn't a blip. It was just the first step on a rise. It's as though someone flipped on a switch in 2012 or 2013, and girls all around the world started getting sick. They started going to psychiatric emergency wards. It's not just the US and Canada, it's Western Europe, it's Australia, it's New Zealand. And so just to show you a little bit, the same pattern in the UK. This is, again, the number per 100,000 in the population. This is a slightly older group, 13 to 16. And what we get is, again, something happened around 2012, and now girls are almost twice as likely to cut themselves as they were in 2010. Australia, same pattern, not quite as sharp, but still very much the same pattern. Everything was fine before 2010, and then after that, the numbers go way, way up. So we have a global mystery that since the early 2010s, young people across the developed world are becoming more anxious, depressed, and lonely, more likely to harm and kill themselves, less educated, less able to focus, hence functionally less intelligent. And why? Why is this happening? People propose all kinds of ideas about what happened in the United States, but if it's happening everywhere at the same time, it's not because of the Newtown shooting. It's not because of anything about American politics. The only theory that I've ever heard that can explain why it happened around the world in the early 2010s is the Great Rewiring theory, that we lost the play-based childhood and we replaced it with the phone-based childhood, and it's just not compatible with human development. So let's zoom in. How exactly did this happen? Let's look at the Great Rewiring. So childhood, we have all these ideas, all these stories that childhood is full of adventure and fun, and kids are going off doing things. And, one of the best-selling books is, oh, the places you'll go. But I hear they're going to reissue it as the places you won't go because we won't let you, because we don't trust you, because we're afraid if we ever take our eyes off you, you'll be kidnapped. And that started in the 1990s. We stopped letting kids out to the point where you hear all these stories now about a kid who was spotted walking down the street without a chaperone. And if you're an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, your parents could be arrested because someone calls the police. They bring in CPS. And so we're all afraid of letting our kids out, not just because of kidnappers, but because of our neighbors. They're going to call the cops on us. Now, as we were doing this in the 90s, an amazing thing happened, which is the internet came in. And I didn't realize this till I wrote the book, that it came in 2 waves. It wasn't steady. So the first wave, this is, as you can see, there's always a period where everybody is getting radio or everybody's getting color TV in the space of 5 or 10 years. And for the personal computer, that was the late 80s, early 90s. And once you get the internet, remember slow dial-up with that loud noise, you put the phone on the thing, that begins in the 90s. And now you put that together with a computer, now you really got something. So you get the first wave of the internet in the 1990s. And it's marvelous. Everyone loves it. Millennials grew up on it. They use it a lot, and they came out fine. Their mental health is fine. They're a creative generation. They're a normal human generation. And so we thought, wow, this stuff is good. Who cares if they're not going outside? They're playing with each other in cyberspace. Doesn't that sound cool? So we weren't worried. We thought this was okay because the millennials were okay. But then the second wave comes in. It was very, very different. So social media, modern social media, there were forms in the 90s, but modern social media, as we know, it starts with Friendster and MySpace and Facebook around 2003, 2004. Then soon after that, you get the smartphone. You put the two together. Now you can be checking your notifications, checking what's going on every moment of every day. You have this with you all the time. When you had to use your parents' computer, as the millennials did, you couldn't carry it on the bus. You couldn't be on it during lunchtime at school. But a smartphone and social media, there's no limit. If you're awake, you can be on it, and it can push out everything else. Indeed, half of all American teenagers say they are online almost all the time. Almost all the time, half of them. And many are on, well, you can't be on more than all the time. So we have to really appreciate just how sharp the break is between the millennials and Gen Z. So millennials, many of you in this audience are millennials, I'm sure. You grew up with flip phones, and flip phones were very effective tools for letting you communicate. In fact, it kind of looks like the communicator from Star Trek, which I grew up thinking, oh, someday it'd be great to have a communicator device. You just flip it open and you talk to this ship. But there was no front-facing camera, no internet, no Instagram, and there was limited data. You had to pay for text. In the blink of an eye, things changed in the early 2010s, and Gen Z, I believe, is defined by the fact that they went through puberty on a smartphone. If you went through puberty on a smartphone with Instagram, that I believe is the combination that made Gen Z so different from the millennials. Because now you're carrying with you a supercomputer. It doesn't just connect you to the world, it connects men all around the world to you, companies all around the world to you. They can get to you. They can ask you for pictures. So all kinds of things happen when we give kids a supercomputer with unlimited data. So we go from a play-based childhood, and the image in the bottom left, some of you may recognize it. Because in the late 80s, it was just normal for a 9-year-old kid to ride around town with an extraterrestrial in his basket. It was just normal. That was something we did sometimes. But by 2015, childhood is this. If you're a boy, you can't go to your friend's house. Because if you go to your friend's house, you can't play video games, and everybody wants to play video games. You have to go home to your computer, your controller, your headset. So our kids are isolated and lonely. You can see that quantified here in this graph, daily average time with friends, the American Time Use Study. And what you see, this is stratified by age. What you see is that the youngest group in this survey was 15 to 24 years old. They spent a lot of time with their friends. They used to spend 2 hours a day hanging out with their friends. This is outside of school and work. Whereas all of the older groups are spending 30 to 40 minutes a day on average with their friends. They're married, they've got jobs. So there used to be a big gap between what kids were doing and what adults were doing in terms of time with friends. But that is over now. Now, I want you to notice that this huge drop, 2019, that data point was collected before we knew what COVID was. And 2020, this was collected in May during the peak of the lockdowns. Do you see the COVID effect? Do you see how COVID accelerated things for young people? I don't. It's a straight line. Because Gen Z began socially distancing the day they got their smartphones, and they were almost done by 2019. COVID came along and they just finished the job, socially isolated, socially distant. And even that, what is that, 45 minutes a day, that's probably an overstatement because some of that time is this. Even when they're with each other, they're not really with each other. And we start them early. This little thing on TikTok, this kid, isn't it amazing? The father's so proud in the audio of how, you look at his kid, look at him go. Now imagine this poor boy's brain doing that for the next 12 years. It's going to change things. His brain is going to grow around his devices. We give kids the phone whenever we need them to be quiet. Here I am at, not me, this is, a friend sent this to me, a kid at soccer, the dad's at soccer practice, and, let's get the younger kid quiet, give her a phone. This is also sent to me by a friend in her child's daycare center. They have toy phones to teach the infants, the toddlers, to be just like mommy and daddy. Now, if we had more time, I'd go into all the specific harms. The book goes into great detail. Chapter 5, I go into these 5 foundational harms that are hitting everybody, boys and girls alike. I don't even have time to read them. There's so many harms. The harms to girls from social media. The girl story is different from the boy's story, but girls are particularly vulnerable to the lure of social media and to the damage done by social media, the constant visual comparison, the comments on your looks, your face, your hair, your body, your skin, everything. Relational aggression, girls share emotions more. So for a variety of reasons, social media really transformed girls' lives even more than boys. Now, the boys' story was a little harder to figure out, and I didn't know what it was when I started the book. But working with my lead researcher, Zach Roush, I think we figured it out. And we drew on Richard Reeves in his wonderful book of Boys and Men. Boys have been retreating from the real world since the 70s. They used to do better than girls in school. They used to go to college more than girls, but that was long ago. By the 80s, girls had achieved parity. Girls are going up, which is great, but boys are going down since the 70s and 80s. And as they're checking out of school, they don't care as much about school. Schools is much, school gets longer, more intense, less recess in the 80s. So it's less hospitable to boys. But that's okay because now they have the internet. And even though porn wasn't a big deal in the early internet because it wasn't the bandwidth, by the time you get into the 2000s, data speeds are fast enough that you can get video porn. And once video porn comes in, we don't have exact percentages, but generally speaking, 5 to 10% of boys get addicted to almost everything that is vaguely addicted. So even though not all boys are watching porn every day, it's not, we're not talking 5%. It's a lot of them are spending a lot of time on it. The video games take up a lot more time, but the point is that this is childhood. This is basically what they're doing. There's not much else that they're doing, and therefore their boys in particular are failing to do the things that would turn them into men. And again, here I drew on Richard Reeves' wonderful book of Boys and Men. So this is the saddest graph in the whole book, I think. The Monitoring the Future study has a lot of statements, and then you look to see whether students, high school seniors, do they agree with them or disagree with them? And what we see here on a question, I feel that my life is not very useful. It used to be from 1979 through 2011, it was like 8, 9% say either they agree, moderately agree or strongly agree. 8 or 9% agree. No change, no trend. And then this happens. As soon as their life transfers away from the real world and into the virtual world where they're not actually doing anything, they're not doing anything. All they're doing is consuming content. They're not even learning, just consuming content, consuming content. Their lives really are not useful. And they feel it. They feel that their lives are not useful. And of course, that helps us understand the rise of self-harm and suicide. So how do we get out of this? I hope I've thoroughly not depressed you, but frightened you or given you a sense that this thing is much bigger even than you thought. This isn't just about rates of depression and anxiety. But here's the good news. We got stuck into this because of the collective action problem, because we all had to give our kids phones at age 10 because your kid comes to you and says, Mom, I'm the only one who doesn't have a phone. And kids are making fun of me. And I'm ostracized. Well, they don't know ostracized. I'm left out of everything. And so we give them a phone. But that collective action force, if we turn it around, that's how we solve this. So with 4 norms, we can change everything. Here they are. I'll run through them one at a time. So norm number 1, no smartphone before high school. No child should have their own personal supercomputer in their pocket with them, available to talk with strangers and play video games on the bus and in class and between classes. Just don't give them a smartphone until high school at the earliest. Give them a flip phone or a phone watch if you want to send them out and have them able to communicate with you. Norm number 2, no social media before 16. Social media is wildly inappropriate. I can't believe we're even discussing this. Social media, there are 5 reasons why we put age limits on things. If something is graphic sexuality, showing genital intercourse, if something is incredibly violent with hands and heads being chopped off, if something is addictive, we put age limits on it: gambling, smoking, drinking. If something causes kids to harm themselves, if it's physically dangerous, we'll put warnings on them. And let's see, wait, there's one more. Hold on a second. Can't remember what the 5th one is. My point is that social media is all 4 of these things. Socially, once your kid gets on social media, not 100% of them, but most of them, they're going to see porn. The boys in particular get fed horrible, horrible violence, people getting run over by cars. The girls' feeds don't tend to get that much, but TikTok kind of knows what attracts you, and boys end up getting a lot of horrible violence. So again, it's just insane. It's completely insane that the current age limit, you have to be old enough to lie and say you're 13. As long as you're old enough to say you're 13, you can go everywhere on the internet. That's got to change. The 3rd norm is the most important one for educators, and it's happening at lightning speed: phone-free schools. Because if anyone is texting, then all the kids feel a pressure to check their text. They don't want to be left out. They want to know what's going on. And so this is why teachers have been unable to get kids' attention since 2012. Now, I'm thrilled that this is happening at lightning speed. So Virginia, the governor announced a couple of months ago, they just issued the final policy. Virginia is all schools are going phone-free bell to bell. Just yesterday, California did the same thing. Red states, blue states, about 15 states have taken actions somewhat like this. So this is happening very, very fast, and it's thrilling. Part of the reason it's happening so fast is that surveys show that almost all of the teachers hate the phones, and almost all of the principals hate the phones. So this survey just came out last month. An overwhelming majority of NEA members support school policy prohibiting cell phone during instructional time. Fine, during class, of course they're not in favor, but look at this. 83% support prohibiting cell phone or personal device usage during the entire school day. So the teachers hate the phones, the principals hate the phones. We were all just afraid of those parents that they would freak out if they couldn't contact their kid during class. So I want to make it clear that there's only one policy that is real. There's only one policy that works. So part of that NEA policy was they asked, how disruptive is student use of cell phones during class? How bad is the problem for you? And then they asked their teachers what the policy was in their school, just as we did at the start of this webinar. And so the most common policy is that, phones are banned during class, but you can use them between classes and at lunch and at recess. That's not a ban. That's nothing. That's a terrible, terrible policy because it means that as soon as class is over, everyone's on their phone. And actually, a lot of them just stay on their phone even during class. So if your school bans phone use during class, but not outside of class, it's a terrible policy. It doesn't do you, it's better than nothing, but not much better than nothing. The other common policy is, we leave it up to the teachers. We're not going to tell the teachers. And that means that most teachers end up giving up, is what my kids say in New York City public schools. They just give up and they can't be phone police all the time. So they just give up. There's only one policy that works, which is a policy in which they store away the phone for the entire day from bell to bell. That's what you have to do. There's really no point in working on anything else in education policy if the kids have access to phones during the day. Every school that goes phone free has the same experience. I've never heard of one that regretted it. I put out calls on Twitter. Can anyone find a story about a school that went phone free and it worked out badly? I can't find one. They all say the same thing. We hear laughter in the hallways again. We haven't heard that in years. Kids are playing, talking, joking. They're happier. Kids feel more included. And then the fourth norm, far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. So I co-founded an organization called Let Grow with Lenore Skenazy, who wrote the book Free Range Kids. And what we're trying to do is help parents and especially schools restore more play to the school day and to home. Our most powerful project, I hope you'll all do this, especially in elementary school or 6th, 7th grade. It's called the Let Grow Project. It's so simple. All you do is you give the kids a little handout. They go home. They have to find something that they think they can do by themselves with their parents' permission, but without their parents. And it might be walking the dog. Like if you're 7, you've never walked the dog before by yourself. Maybe you think you can do it, and they do it, and they're like jumping up and down with excitement. This is the most amazing program, and it costs $0. It costs nothing whatsoever. Just go to Let Grow, go to letgrow.org, download the toolkit for the Let Grow experience, it's called, and we'll guide you through it. It's incredibly powerful. It reduces anxiety in anxious kids. It reduces anxiety within a week or two, which is much faster than Prozac. So there's no reason not to do this. Do it. It's, have like the entire 3rd grade and the entire 7th grade, let's say, do this for a year. And then before you know it, people are going to see 7 and 8-year-olds out on the street again. You're going to see 8, 9-year-olds walking to the store to buy milk and then walking home. And people aren't going to call the police anymore because it'll become a common sight. So finally, what should schools do now? I've already said a couple of things, but I want to make clear there's the standard stuff that schools are doing, which a lot of it is expensive. It's new curricula. It's a lot of teacher time. And I don't know of any evidence that any of this stuff works. I don't know. I can't say it doesn't work. I'm just saying all the efforts at teacher-led or adult-led interventions to teach students skills, there's some studies that show that they even backfire. So this is what's commonly being done. And I don't know that any of this stuff has shown any effects. Instead, what I urge you to do is this. In the book, I quote a Polynesian proverb, standing on a whale, fishing for minnows. And there are 2 giant whales here. There are 2 things that you can do, cost nothing, and have a big effect. So one is to go phone free, which we've talked about, and the other is to become playful. Just put more play in the day. Kids used to have a lot of play in the school day, but in the 80s, after the losing ground or whatever the report was called, we began cutting down everything to make more room for math and reading and English, things like that. So you can easily restore more play. in the school, and Let Grow has some ideas for how to do it. If you go to anxiousgeneration.com, the website for the book, click on the Take Action button. We have a lot of great resources for you there. So you go there, and then there's resources for parents, and there's resources for educators in schools. And what you'll see there, start with the Educator Action Guide. I'll show you what it is. It's 4 steps. So phone-free schools is number 1. You've got to do that. You have to do that as soon as you can. And then step number 2 is more independence and free play. So that's longer recess. Play club is a very simple way of opening up the playground before class starts and keep it open 3 to 5, or after school for 2 hours. So just adding more play into the day, especially in elementary school, it's absolutely vital. And by the way, if you give kids longer recess, you'll help their eyes grow properly. And then the third is assign the Let Grow experience, which I just told you about. It's amazingly powerful in grades K through 8. And finally, send a memo to parents. I know there's always been a kind of an invisible wall where you get to control what happens at school, but you don't dare tell parents what they should do at home. But here's the thing. This is a collective action problem. And what the kids are doing at home is interfering with, they're so addicted, it's hard for them to pay attention in school. And what they're doing in school on their devices makes it harder for parents who want to keep them off at home. They're on screens all day long, and it's really causing problems all around. So we have a button, send a memo to parents, because a lot of schools are now doing this. When they announced the phone-free policy, so on our site, we have a template for you here. You can obviously edit it, but you can send a message home to parents explaining what you're doing, asking for their support. No mandatory anything, but just, we hope you'll consider delaying giving your kids a smartphone. We hope you'll consider keeping them off of social media, because this is how you solve collective action problems. They're looking to the school for leadership. When parents are on their own, you get this race to the bottom, where before you know it, the 10-year-olds say, I need a phone, and then the 9-year-olds begin saying they need a phone, and it goes down and down and down. But the school is very well placed to say, we think we should have these norms. We think that it's best if children don't have a smartphone before high school. It's best if they don't have social media before 16. If you say that, you are going to help so many parents hold the line, because parents are upset. They don't know what to do, and they give in to the pressure, so that you can really help them. So that's my talk to you. In conclusion, it sure looks like the phones are making our students dumber, and boy, are they making our lives as educators harder. So it's up to us in schools and universities and administrators to roll back the phone-based childhood. Here are some resources for you. I hope you'll go to anxiousgeneration.com. I hope you'll subscribe to my Substack. We have a lot of great writing on it, a lot of different perspectives. It's free. And I hope you'll especially go to letgrow.org and do the Let Grow experience. Thank you very much, and let's talk.
Great. Well, thank you so much. There's so much information in there. I know it went by quickly. You can get resources after, but thank you. I hope people are not beaten down, but lifted up. We have almost 3,000 people on the call right now, and I want to call attention to the quote that you said, right? This is a collective action that will require a collective response. So maybe by the end of this hour, if we want to all agree to something, whether it's in our own schools, making an announcement in our own homes to wait until high school for cell phones, or everyone does one Let Grow assignment that you described and you can get in the book, maybe there is some type of collective action that we can do here, just even among us. But anyway, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I have, and also that I've pulled together. There's so many questions running around. So banning cell phones, it's not a small change, right? It's not like when those of us in schools, we had to ban baseball hats or even, gang colors or gang paraphernalia, right? It's a more ambitious school-wide change. So if you could speak to, given your experience, what have been some of the obstacles in that full school-wide ban, and what are some tips or suggestions you have to make that transition to a cell phone-free school as smooth and successful as possible?
Sure. So I'm not an expert in that. I hear some things, I've gotten some feedback, but I'll just share with you what I know. So first, at the top level, I was so excited that New York City, that our commissioner said he was going to make an announcement. I spoke with him. He was going to go phone free, but then I find, well, they're not actually going to do it. because they didn't think it through. As far as I can tell, I don't know for sure, but as far as I can tell, they didn't think through the implementation rules, and they were trying to rush it. They were trying to do it by February. Um, because now this is the only thing that actually, of all the things I said today, this is the only thing that takes some money. And it doesn't have to take money, but it usually does. And so I don't think they thought that through. Arkansas gives us a good model. The governor of Arkansas is really excited about this. She read my book. She called me up. She sent a copy of it to every governor in America. And what she did was she issued a statement that they're encouraging schools to go phone free, and she put up money. They didn't have enough for everybody, but they said, here's 5, 10, I don't know how many, here's like $5 million, so that any school that wants just apply for this, for yonder pouches or phone lockers. So for administrators, make it easy for the schools. Now, there is a very low cost way. Some schools, depending on your physical setup, some schools have done, you just get like bubble wrap envelopes or just manila folders in a file drawer at the front of the classroom. So if there's a homeroom, everybody makes their own folder, they put their name on it and crayon or whatever, and they put their devices in there and it stays in the homeroom. So that might work for some schools, and that's basically free. So think about that. Think about the implementation. I don't know. I can't tell you whether yonder pouches are better than phone lockers, because yonder pouches do work. The kids can get around them, but yet even still, I'm told over and over again, it still makes a big difference. They do seem to, especially if this. Oh, here's the other thing. My daughter in my daughter's middle school here in New York City. In 7th grade, they went to yonder pouches, and she said everybody else can just open their pouch. Mine, for some reason, I can't get it open using the tricks that they use. But most other kids are opening their pouches. And I spoke to the yonder people, and they said if you do phone checks, pouch checks, because the things that the kids do damage the pouch. So if you do yonder pouches, make it clear that you're going to actually look at the pouches once a week, once a month. But anyway, yonder pouches work. I think phone lockers probably work better, but I don't know many schools that have used them. So I think what you want to be doing, especially at the district level, is say, we're going to go phone free, not in 3 months, but like next September. We're going phone free by next September. And let's learn from each other. What works, in a huge school versus a small school, high school versus it's going to be different. I don't know what the best policy is. The other thing I would say is the main objection that we get is the school shooter objection. If there's a school shooter, a lot of parents are freaked out about a school shooter. And so they want their kids to have a smartphone. But there's two things. So what you say to that is, you say, I understand your fear. I understand, I'm a parent too. My kids, we got an email the other day that the school was on closure or something but I didn't freak out about it. It was nothing, but it happens. And the experts say, in the event of a shooting, what you want the kids to be quiet and paying attention and doing what they drilled to do. What you don't want is every kid pulling out their phone and crying and sobbing and talking to their parents. So what you say is, I understand that we all would want to talk to our kid in that situation, but we have to do what's best for the kids, not what's best for us.
I think that's very helpful to really focus on the phone ban itself. But I think what I've also heard is to go beyond that. I did a great podcast with a superintendent from upstate New York who said, he made sure, in addition to banning the phones, that he made it more engaging to be at school. He got pinball, old school, ping pong, pinball. I've heard of people who do create pickleball in the yard. He started doing overnight trips to Philly and DC, 4 nights, 3 nights. So those are some of the things. And yeah,
right. A play-based school. I mean, play-based is for the younger kids especially, but a reality-based, a social interaction-based. The kids are lonely. Gen Z is so lonely. Let them at least interact with each other at school. I love that principle.
Yeah. So yes, he was a superintendent, did his whole district. And, I think also language is very important for us in education. So instead of calling it the cell phone ban initiative, why not the focus in school, or, reduce distraction? There's a lot of other ways.
Yeah. Phone-free schools. I chose, with an Atlantic article a year and a half ago, I said, they wanted 5. I said, no, don't say ban, phone-free schools.
Yeah. And I think, I think my understanding is that the chance of your child being killed by a school shooter is like 1, out of like 5 million, 10 million. And there are much higher risks when kids do have their cell phones in schools. Kids are going into the bathrooms and bullying or planning to beat up a kid and filming it. There's much worse.
The number of kids who are dead from social media, I don't know if it's 10 or 50 or 1,000 times greater than school shooters. It's not a lot. I mean, logical arguments often don't resonate. But I just heard someone say, it was actually a comedian. He talked about how kids used to have casts on their arms long ago. Nobody has a cast anymore. Nobody gets hurt physically. He said all the wounds are psychological now, and those take a lot longer to heal.
Are much more prevalent in schools, for sure. And the other thing, he said, so there are a lot of kids, they put their fake phones in the Yonder pouches or whatever. But what he said is when they found kids, what he did was after school, they had to stay from 3 to 5. And that was when all the kids got their cell phones back. So then they were really left out. And so after one time with a fake phone, it kind of
okay, good.
But anyway, yeah, lots of ideas. And I have to say, I love educators are sharing and helping each other out in the chat. It is way too fast for me but there's lots of suggestions there. But, sort of going on.
Hey, I hope you guys can save the chat and then extract, actionable suggestions.
Yeah, maybe we could even share it with people afterwards, or you can say it to do research for the next installment, your next book, or your newsletter. John has a newsletter on Substack called
Afterbabble.com.
Yeah, but getting to school shooter and parents, there's a lot of questions. I'm going to see if I can put them all together about parents. So there's several parts. First, there's how do schools get parents on board? And you shared a stat that a very high percentage of parents are in support of cell phone bans. I just very recently, a few days ago, I think, saw the National Parents Union that 78% of parents wanted their kids to have a cell phone for access in case of an emergency. So I don't know where the research is.
I don't know what that organization is.
Either way.
It depends on how you ask the question. I do not trust that. That is this one weird poll.
Okay. But whatever a lot of people are asking, a lot of educators are saying, how do I get the parents on board, right? How do we get them to care? And they're looking for information that is bite-sized, doable, and not preachy. How do you get parents on your side for this?
Well, I mean, first, I think, so look, a year ago, parents were very confused. They were very alarmed by what was going on, but they didn't know what to do, and it was hard to do anything. And now that my book is being widely discussed, and my goal was to give some clear norms. And so the explosion of support from parents, and really especially mothers, there's an intensity among mothers that's just far beyond what I see in fathers. The passion for saving their kids from this phone-based childhood is so strong. So any move you make where you might have gotten objections from 5 or 10% of very vociferous parents a year ago, now you're going to get vociferous support from 20 or 30 or 40% of parents. So I would urge you all, be bold. Don't be held back by what you think things were like a year ago, because it's an entirely different game. Today is an entirely different game from a year ago. And there's also, speaking as a social psychologist, we're very sensitive to what we think the trends are and what we think the reality is now. And this tidal wave of change, this is our chance to act. If we don't act now, well, actually, I don't think it's going to go away. So it's not like if we don't act now, we'll never act. But we can act now much more boldly than we could have a year ago.
One other thing,
which is bring in parents to be the spokespeople. Don't be just like principal or administrator saying, I know, here's our new policy, you have to do it. But bring in parents to testify. Bring in parents who will say, my oldest, she got on Snapchat at 11, or and it was terrible, and I want to protect my younger children, and whatever. Get parents to testify, because look, most parents have seen this. Talk to parents of older teens. Talk to the older teens themselves. Older teens often regret that they were given a phone so early. You almost never hear of a teen, like a 20-year-old, who says, I wish I'd gotten a phone earlier. I wish my parents had given me a phone earlier. That's not very common.
Yeah, and you have a recent article in the Times about Gen Zers having regrets and not wanting to give cell phones to their kids.
That's right.
Yeah, I wanted to build on what you were saying, John, and I think it's really helpful to understand that some parents are going to appeal to the head and others to the heart. So you can share some stats, but then you should also share the stories, and I love that idea of bringing parents in. And it's one thing to send a memo home, but I also, like I said, I put together a discussion guide. I do think it's a great opportunity to bring families into the school and having coffee or evenings or whenever to really discuss these matters, because it's top of mind for so many families. So make it a two-way discussion if you can. Send the memo home and then have the discussion.
That's
And
right. And the memo is on our website. Just as somebody said they want a copy of the memo. Go to, like, we give that as a sample. It's right there. You'll see it. You'll get it.
So sticking to the theme of parents and what schools can do, the question I'm seeing a lot is what can schools do about students' cell phone use outside of the school day? Is there anything they can do about the use at home? And are parents making it worse by modeling? I guess that goes to another question. But yeah, what can schools do about student cell phone use after hours?
Yeah. So I'll just give you an example. I spoke at so Grace Church School is a private school right near me here at NYU. And they have like a parents technology committee. They had like a group of parents who were going to weigh in on all things about technology, including, Chromebooks and everything. And so that was a great, so they brought me in to speak, and then they were then able to also, really try to communicate as parents. They're very much more credible. They're really able to communicate about how can we protect our kids from this. And so it's things like, how can we work together so that our kids' lives are not taken over by screens and phones? And so if you think about it, if you get a phone-free school day, and then if your kids do sports in the afternoons, team sports are even better now than they were 20 years ago, because kids desperately need something to put them together physically. So if your kids are phone-free school, sports in the afternoon, and of course you must have a very rigid policy about mealtime. When we're sitting down at the table for dinner, no phones of any kind. You don't get to look anything up. So now you're basically at 6 or 7 o'clock, and they haven't had any time on their phones. And now you can do something in the evening. But then, of course, by 9:30 or 10, all screens must come out of the bedroom. And right there, we're done. Like, they have a phone-free childhood now. They have 2 hours a day on it. But that's so much better than 10 or 12 hours a day.
So there are a lot of people on the call this afternoon who are saying, what about for those of us, the cat's already out of the bed, my bag, my kid already has a smartphone, shouldn't have a smartphone, whatever. Right. So is that the number 2 hour? Like, they want to know hard and fast. Is there a number of hours you should try to limit it to?
Well, I can't give you a specific number of hours, but I can say is, if you've given your kid a phone and he or she is still in elementary school, take it back. Elementary school, no problem, just take it back. Now, always you should coordinate with, if you can do this with the parents of your kids' friends, then it's much, much easier. But elementary school, no, just take it back. That's crazy. Do not let them have a smartphone in elementary school. They can have a flip. If they're going out in the world, they can have a flip phone or a phone watch. A lot of parents are saying they're having good luck with a phone watch and no apps on it. Just you want to be able to have them call if they need you, and text. It's very convenient, but they don't need a supercomputer with internet access in their pocket. So elementary school, just take it back. Middle school is trickier because it's totally woven into everything. And so in middle school, I mean, if you just gave them the phone recently, I would say take it back. But again, try to do it because what the kids they're not so afraid of losing the phone. They're afraid of being left out. And so if you do it with a group, you might be able to do it. High school is, of course, much harder. So at that point in middle school, or especially high school, we're talking about just limiting the danger of it. I wish I was not. So I had a very clear no social media policy with my kids, and my daughter wanted Instagram in 6th grade. In 7th grade, she said, "I'm glad you didn't let me on it. The Instagram girls are stupid. She can see what it does to girls." But she really wants Snapchat. She's in 10th grade now, because everybody is communicating on Snapchat. So she is left out. But I've said no, because a lot of bad stuff happens on Snapchat.
Somewhere where schools can help with that collective action. They could start a wait until high school, where everybody in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, all the parents sign a pledge. And if you get at least 10 families, then the pledge holds. We're not going to give
That's
our
right.
kids
That's right. So you can go to wait until 8th, but just remember, it's actually wait until 9th. She picked 8th because it rhymed with wait, but
I said high school. But schools are good places to organize that, because they have access to all of the families' information. I see the time, so let me get a couple questions for educators. So some educators are concerned. They're wondering, what about all the technology they use in school? They use Nearpod for their lessons. Schools have a BYOD, bring your own device policy. Kids are on iPads. What's the research on that? Is that just as bad as social media? What are you saying about that?
That's next for me. So I started by let's just get the personal phones out. That I'm confident about, and that we can do without much pain. It sure looks as though the Chromebooks and the iPads are bad. They're generally bad things. Of course, in theory, they can do all sorts of things for us, but the distraction effects are so vast that it probably outweighs. A report by UNESCO 2 years ago said that. They said it doesn't, we don't really see any evidence that these things are helping. Students are getting less, they're learning less around the world. Education's going down since we brought these things in around 2012. So odds are these things are bad and we should get rid of them. Now, to say that, I understand, like this is now we're not talking about like pulling out a thorn. We're talking about like taking out bones from the body. I mean, I understand these things are worked in, but we'll have a post in a few days. By next week, we'll have a post at After Babel from Amy. Oh, shoot, what's her name? Who she'll have a post on the technology. The key thing is this: the devices have extraordinary distraction powers, which overwhelm every other benefit you could imagine. It's great for the teacher to have technology. It's great for the teacher to have a screen. But having a personal device that is your device or that you customize is almost certainly going to be bad for their education. And I understand you can't just get rid of them because everything is now dependent. My kids turn everything in on Jupiter. Everything is online. But we're going to have to, this is going to be hard, but we're going to have to work together. And I say, look, let's at least start with elementary school. Look, the tech billionaires, they don't let their kids have the technology. They send them to Waldorf schools. So let's at least start with, elementary school. No tech in elementary school, a personal tech. Teachers can have it. And then we'll do middle school. Let's try to really rip it entirely out of middle school. High school, there probably will be a place for it, but it's going to be a lot less than it is. Again, I'm not an expert in this yet, but this is where I'm going next year. Those are my first thoughts.
Okay. We're all educators here, so we can't end without talking about, what do you think is a responsibility of schools, and really how can schools educate kids, right? When there was an age for cigarettes, alcohol, right? We have education in health ed. You learn about drugs and smoking and vaping and all that kind of stuff. So where's their place in school? And before I finish the question, one person asked, and this is more of a request than a question, would you be willing to create a short video that schools could use to show directly to students? So, not this whole 1 hour webinar, educating them about the dangers of social media use. So would you be willing to do that? And how do you think schools can actually teach kids, not just about the dangers, but what about responsible media use?
Yeah. Well, so we're just working now on a book. There will be a version of The Anxious Generation for middle school kids, but it won't be out for like a year at best. And yes, that's a great idea. I should do a video for kids. I don't have a moment in the next 3 months, but I will put it on my list. And even if it's not me, there's so many teachers are coming forward and want to be part of this. So I'll try to have something by January to show to kids. That is a great idea. Thank you. And then
anything else about teaching kids about the responsible use? Like, why not teach kids, right? Like, let's examine this app. How does it get you hooked? That kind of.
I think that is worth doing. Oh, there's a book, Kids, Brains, and Screens. There is a book. Hold on, I have it right here. For now, Screen Strong is one organization that we're working with. So this book is made as a workbook. It really educates about what happens to the brain. I'd recommend people check this out. I think it's very good. I'd just beware of, a lot of the efforts to date have been like digital wellness, digital citizenship, pluses and minuses, use it responsibly. I say, no. If you're 11 and 12, no, we're not going to teach you how to use Instagram responsibly. We got to raise the age to 16, enforce it. It's wildly inappropriate for children. So yeah, there's a role to educate, but these things are so socially addictive. Cigarettes were biologically addictive, but you never had 95% of kids smoking. You could choose not to smoke. Social media is so addictive, you get 95% using it because you can't choose to not use it by yourself. So I'm not a big fan. I mean, yes, of course we should educate them, but don't expect much to change from the education. We have to just raise the age and enforce it.
Okay. I know we're at 1 minute over. So somebody asked a question about, so how do you incorporate play for high school? And my interpretation when I read your book is you didn't always mean literal play. You meant more face-to-face interactions.
Yes, hanging out. I want everybody on this call to think back on high school. What were the fun things about high school? And most of it was probably hanging out with your friends. Okay. Maybe you were drinking beer when you shouldn't have been. Maybe you were, getting into some trouble. But you had time to hang out with your friends, and that's crucial. We're so afraid. Now, obviously, look, we're in a very litigious society. If you let high school kids hang out, something bad might happen. The school might get sued. I understand. We can't be as loose as we used to be. But I think we have to move that way. We have to understand that the high school kids, they need unsupervised time to just hang out and make jokes with each other. And if if they have their phones, they're just going to be on their phones. So there's no benefit to them hanging out. They're just on their phones. But if you take away the phones and you give them time to hang out, good stuff is going to happen.
There's so many other good questions. Some of them are answered in your book about the impact disproportionately on Black and Latino students, girls, boys.
LGBT, they're the ones who get the worst of it.
They have the worst of it. So there are some answers in your book. I know we're over time, and I know there's so many questions because it's such an important issue, but I will just give you here, first of all, a thank you to Ed Webb, and also, of course, Penguin Random House Education and Penguin Press, who published the book. If you would like to get copies of the book, where I do think you can get some of the answers, they are here. So a big thank you. And also a link is, I think, being put in the chat if you would like to get some books. And just a big thank you. Here's where you can follow or find John. Here's my contact info and Penguin Random House, of course. And there is a short survey if you'd like to give your feedback. But really, thank you to all of you. This will be a collective action solution. And so we are counting on schools to do that. I do know that, maybe there's some interest in doing some research on what happens when we go cell phone free. There may be some superintendents out there who could reach out and do some of that research. But yes, best luck to all of you. It's for the best of our students' future, and a special thank you to you. Thank you, John, for taking this time. Well worth it. So informative. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jen. Good luck to all of you. Thanks to EdWeb. Let's roll this back. Let's do this together.